Hello and welcome to Crochet My Way. I'm just doing a really quick tutorial on stitching away your tail ends after you've finished a round or finished a project. Just got a couple of quick little tips and tricks for you, and there's a couple of ways to do it. So let's get started. Now let's just, before we begin, quickly talk about the needles. Now there are a lot of new products out there for threading your yarn tails, and I can't use any of them, they just don't work for me, but you do whatever works for you. I tend to use these darning needles or tapestry needles or whatever you wish to call them. They have a nice wide eye. Now these are the ones I use when I'm working in worsted weight yarns. I have smaller ones for when I'm working in smaller, thinner yarns. So you need to have probably 2 or 3 sizes in your toolkit depending on the yarn you're working in. Now all 3 of these have nice wide eyes for threading of the thicker yarns. Okay, but the main thing to look at is this, the other end of them, the points. Now if you look closely, this middle one, and I'll separate it out, has a very fat shaft and a real point just right at the tip. Let me tilt that a little bit. Oh, it's so hard to get a good image. Right here it points really abruptly, but the thing is you can get it stabbed in, but this is a very thick shaft and it's just really hard to work with, I find. You may not, I do. Then my other 2 needles are very similar. One's just a bit longer is all, but one has a more tapered edge to the point. Oh God, I wish I could show you this well. The other one comes to a duller tip. Very hard to see on a camera. I prefer this one with the tapered point because it isn't just about stabbing into the thread, it's about also sliding through your threads and loops with more ease. I find this one, first of all I've got to wiggle it to get it in because the point is so dull, and then after that I'm struggling. So this is my go-to for my thicker yarns. It's a very well worn, the shine has worn off most of it, and I dread the day that it can no longer be used. Alright, let's not waste any more time. So that's the needle I'm going to use, and I'll show you now how to thread some of these tails. Right, so the first thing I want to say is I like to fray the end of my yarn like that. It is easier to then fold it over like this, and it folds flatter and therefore slides really easily through the eye of your needle. Okay, I'll do that one more time. You just fold them over the needle, take the needle out, see a nice flat line of threads there, and just thread them. Perfect. Right, so the principle of threading away your tails, and I'm one of those people who will knot everything first. I never leave loose ends, especially after needle joins. I don't like them, I don't trust myself. It's myself I don't trust, I still will knot my work. So the idea behind it is to find somewhere to thread your yarn and to go back and forth at least 2, preferably 3 times if possible, to anchor the threads. Washing and constant use of something will slowly work those threads loose if they're not anchored back onto themselves. So here's how I do it, and of course I can only show you how I do it. I tend to prefer to go back into my own colour, and usually a row or 2 after I've completed a round, I must admit, but for now, for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to do it. So I will pinch and squeeze and split threads everywhere that I can. I just split that one, pull my yarn through, and then I'll start working. So I might just go in there. Sometimes I will even come down, work across, and I'm splitting threads as I go, just because I can and I want to. It just anchors it better for my money. The other reason I do that is because you don't want to accidentally bleed through to the other side. If you're going under the loops like this, you could end up accidentally, especially if you're using a different color, you could end up accidentally showing through. So I like to stay on the back of the loops, split them so that they stay to the back, and do that a few times down like that. So you've got a line, you can just see it coming through the line in there. Okay, then I will come back And when I come back, I will split not just the loops that I've gone through, but also, if you can see this, this is this thread. So I will also split that. And then split another thread, and then go through a bit further, and then split the little tail that I'm working on. That's why you need a little bit of a point on the tip there so you can do these things. It's very hard with a blunt needle to do what I'm trying to do now. So go back a few of them. Don't have to go all the way, and then pull through again. Now don't always just yank it. I always leave a little bit, and then I do this stretch to make sure there's enough give. And if there is, then I might tighten it up a little bit more and keep making sure, because if you don't want to pull it, cinch it too tight, because then it'll ruin the look of your work. It'll just pull. I've got a little bit left now, and I will go back for a third round, and again splitting as I go. You can see that I've split the stitch, I've split the tail twice there, and I just keep going and splitting. And so that makes it really hard for that thread to come unraveled. Pull it through gently, not all the way. Give it a bit of a stretch, make sure there's room back there, and then you can just trim that little tip with your scissors. Boom. And now that's threaded away in the same colour. So even though you can actually see it quite clearly here, on a great big piece, if the blanket is accidentally flipped, it really won't show that much. Okay, so that's how I do the working of the tails, by threading it backwards and forwards 3 times on itself. Okay, you can do the same again with the next one. The other tip that I have for you is to not go to the same spot. I would go down this side for the next one. So you don't want too much bulk in one place. When you turn it over, you really can't see anything. So I'll just quickly do this one, and let's have a look and see if I don't sort of go the way I did it, where I split the stitches. If you just come in and just start working, actually I might come down to the brown. Let's see if it'll show on the brown. Let me just get into position. So if I'm trying to work my tails away through the brown, because maybe there's just no room anywhere else, you really need to be careful about going under the stitches, because already you can see my needle is bleeding through. And then as soon as I pull that thread, it'll show, which you just don't want. You don't want it to show. Now, there it is. It's only a little bit here. I've only done a bit, but you can see it. And that's not what we want. Okay, so I'll pull that out again and redo it properly. So that's really just a very quick summary. I like to start with knots. Whoops, I'm too far up. I'm zoomed in too far. I like to start with knots. You don't have to, but I like to. I've worked it up once. I've split both stitch threads at the back all the way down, and then on the way back I've done both the stitch and the tail threads, splitting them as I went, and that really anchors the thread, and no matter how much it gets used and washed, it's not going to come away. Alright, so that's that. I'll also show you how some people like to work their tails away as they're going, while they're working. That's a little second bit. I'll do that in a second. Okay, so if you're one of those people who can't be bothered doing the sewing afterwards like me, there's other ways you can do it. So let's just start around. I'm just starting with a standing single crochet. So I have one tail sitting here already. You can grab that tail and bring it round and under. Leave that knot where you can see it. Just leave it there. And when you start working your stitches, you just work over the tail, as it's called. Just going right over the top of it and working your stitches. Okay, like that. And that's a nice easy way to do it. I'm not always convinced that that tail is going to stay where it's supposed to, because there's actually nothing anchoring it. So you can either do that, you can do a combination. In fact, you can do some of it like that, and then later on come back and thread it back through itself on the back end, this remaining tail, you know, pull it a bit snugger and then actually anchor it that way. There's, you know, look, there's so many schools of thought, and there are so many tutorials out there. You could find 1,000 of them, and everybody's got something different to say. But for me, the thing is about security, especially if you're giving things away. You just don't want little bits of yarn dangling from the back of the work and people not knowing whether they can trim them or not. The other way you can do it is a variation on the working over. So here's my tail. Some people weave it along as they go. So you weave it in and out of your stitches, maybe over the working yarn, bring it back over, maybe push it back. There's a lot of ways you can do this too. You can bring it back and then work one over the top occasionally, then take it back up and work away. And I confess, I do use these techniques at many times, you know, depending on what I'm doing. And so again, it's worked away. It's not particularly visible, but it is also again not particularly secured, and multiple washes will start to work that tail out of itself. So again, you can maybe leave the last section of 2 or 3 inches, or 5 to 10 centimeters, and then work this back through itself. There's the tail there. So if I come back, I would try and skewer and split the tail itself on the way back. There's multiple ways to do it. Do whatever you feel most comfortable and confident with. This technique is the one I feel most confident and comfortable with, but I also add the extra layer of a knot. It's got to do with you and how you feel your technique is. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and sometimes my knots and my threading aren't as secure as I would like them to be. So that's why I add these extra layers of security to my own work. That's my way. So I'll leave you with that. You can have a play around, work out what works best for you. I hope this video was a little bit useful in just taking out some of the confusion about what you should or should not do. And really, technically, there isn't anything you should or should not do unless it's really out there. But, work out what you feel most comfortable in terms of the security of your tails, and whether you would give that to somebody else and know that they're safely tucked away. That's your call. Bye for now.